9 o'clock. Morning, everyone. Can we have apologies for absence, please?
Yes, Chair. If I could just advise members that this meeting will be live streamed on the council website until the time in which we exclude the public. I have apologies from Councillor Bridget Rowlands, Leslie Morgan, Jan Curtis, and Lloyd.
Thank you. Are there any disclosures of personal or prejudicial interest, please? From the members now? Okay, thank you. Now we go to the minutes. They're on pages 1 to 9. Page 1 is the meeting on the 9th of July, so that's pages 1, 2 and 3. Could I have somebody to move the minutes, please?
Yeah.
Thank you. And the seconder? Thank you, Cheryl. And the minutes on the 27th of August. Would somebody like to move them, please? Thank you, Sharon. And the seconder, please. Thank you. So now we go to agenda item 4, which is the harmonisation of the taxi and private hire licence in Wales. Mrs. Lewis is going to take us through this briefly. We would have all read it anyway, so it's just a matter of just bringing up the relevant points, I think we decided. Thank you, Mrs. Lewis.
Okay, morning members. This report is for information. You would have previously read it, but it provides the details for members on the new statutory standards for taxi and private hire services, which have been issued by both the DfT and also in a document by Welsh Government, who now have devolved responsibility for taxi licensing back in March 2021. And you've got both those documents in the report at page 9 and pages 49. They're quite comprehensive and sets out exactly what the intention is whilst we are awaiting Welsh Government to consider and develop new legislation for Wales. Now, we've heard more recently that the DfT look unlikely to get new legislation through in England, but we are pressing ahead and hoping for Senedd time in the second semester to hear this legislation, and I know that we're actively lobbying for that to happen. As you will know, our legislation is for hackney carriages 1847, and it's well out of date, and obviously for private hire 1976, and that feels, you know, immensely out of date as well. There were no computers, etc. back then, so there's a lot of interpretation and grey areas in all that we deal with, especially when I'm sure Councillor Anderson will agree when they talk about bales of hay in the 1847 legislation. So it's something that we really need and really support here in Swansea and across Wales. So the recommendations and the focus really is that we need to protect children and vulnerable adults, and we've got to regulate better the sector. And obviously the new legislation will aim to achieve that. But in the meantime, the guidance that's been issued, we've been asked really to amend as a priority some of the standards we've got in place already, and also then to look to consult or to adopt some of the chapters in the document, which are outlined in the report at paragraphs sort of 11, 12 and 13 specifically. There's a lot of work behind each of these headers, I must say. We can't underestimate the resources it's going to take for every application pack to be changed, and information on the websites, training, etc. that goes behind each of these changes. So there are 5 main reasons that the government want us to introduce these, and the first and most paramount one is public safety, obviously, and that's the main purpose of licensing. So it aims to ensure drivers, operators, vehicles are safe and suitable to transport the public, and in order to do that, we need to bring that up to date. And the other reasons are outlined in your paragraph 8 to have better consistency of the standards across Wales, harmonised enforcement, increased accessibility of vehicles in Wales, and better standards of customer service. So it encompasses all that we need to put in place. So each of the changes will need detailed consideration prior to its implementation, and to ensure this is achieved, it's proposed to undertake a phased review of the existing standards, because it's going to take some time to go through each of them. You'll know that already we've adopted the Institute of Licensing guidance for determining the suitability of applicants, and we've been using that now since 2019. We've also got things in place like medicals, Group 2 medicals, where some authorities in Wales are still only asking for Group 1, for instance. So we've already made headway in Swansea. We've got a number of things already under our belt. We already provide safeguarding training, but it's looking for that consistent element now, so that we're all offering the same, because what you'll find across Wales is that somebody in Powys, for instance, didn't have to do one application criteria there, but they do in Swansea. So it was easier to get licensed in Powys, and we saw that quite a few years ago, and we addressed that by liaising very closely with Powys. So in summary, Chair, the DfT recommends that all licensing authorities produce a taxi and private hire statement of principles. So it brings together all these procedures and changes that we're going to be looking at over the next few years, really. I think it's going to take a number of years to put this together. We're really hot on the heels of getting that done. So the primary and overriding objective is the statement is to protect the public. And then we'll need to review that every 5 years. And that statement of principles will be coming to you to consider. It's in the standing orders for the council that licensing committee have this remit, whereas other sort of policy type documents would normally go to council. So they're going to be coming to you, some of which I said will be operational. So they'll be coming to you for information only. Some will need some consideration before they go out to consultation with members of the trade. So just to give you a flavour today, this report and obviously its appendices gives you the detail, but we are going to plan on taking this piece by piece and then bringing it back to you as and when they occur. Chair?
Thank you. Councillor Philpott, you've got a question?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'll be really brief. Thanks for that, Yvonne. It is really welcomed, and I'm sure that Cyril's going to say something about that as well. Two specific questions. One about the DBS checks being every 6 months. We don't have that at the moment, do we?
No, we don't. At the moment, it's every 3 years.
Yeah.
And what this actually means is that the DBS enhanced report will still need to be done on grant of application, and then within a number of days, which is 56 days usually, the applicant would need to sign up to an update service, and then they pay an additional £13 for that. So they pay £40 for the enhanced DBS, and then within a certain amount of time they need to then sign up to an update service. That's still being discussed with the Local Government Association at the moment in how that can be achieved, because there are going to be repercussions for those that don't sign up to it, and then people will be coming before you for possibly suspending their licence because they haven't. So they're still working through that detail. That's one that we'll bring you later on with more detail once they have all been determined. But what it means is once they've signed up to that DBS update service, we as officers then will have opportunity to go on to the government gateway to be able to see if anything has changed. We can't see any records. It will only change if it will only tell us if a change has occurred within that 6 months. If it has, what happens then is that we will ask that applicant to do a brand new enhanced DBS. So we don't have access to any background systems. It just tells us when there's a change. And it allows us then to check on a more regular basis, should we have a complaint, for instance, or every 6 months at a minimum. And that's the consistency going to be across England and Wales, because the DBS criminality side of things is not devolved to Welsh Government. It's something that the DFT are bringing about. So it means that across England and Wales, everybody will have that standard.
Yeah, I think that would be welcome, but it doesn't detract from the fact that a licence holder would still have to notify us within 48 hours. But it does mean that we wouldn't be going 3 years before finding out that they hadn't notified us in the 48 hours. The only other question I had, just regarding the two medicals that you briefly alluded to, it does say the applicant's own practitioner or practice, and only in exceptional cases would it be with prior agreement with another medical assessor. I'm not sure if that was in before, but how would we know that it is the applicant's own medical surgery or doctor?
It's actually on the actual form that they need to fill in. We've got our own prescribed forms, and in the cases where the doctor is not available and they've even gone to a different practice, they have to declare, that doctor has to declare that they've had access to their full medical history before we will accept that medical.
Okay, thanks. There was it is highlighted to look at the form, but on the information that we had, you couldn't actually click on it, and it didn't have time. Sorry, Yvonne, to go on.
That's okay.
Brilliant. Thanks, Yvonne.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Yvonne.
Morning.
Yeah. One thing you missed out with the bale of hay was the horse's nose bag for the feed. But no, I'm really happy with what I've seen here on the reports. Cheryl brought up two things that I was going to ask. One was the DBS. I think there's going to be an added cost to the driver, and that was my only concern there. And the CCTV is really welcome, but again, who's going to face these costs? Obviously, it's going to be down to the driver or the owner of the vehicle. And I quite welcome the booking staff because in the report it states they can be seen as being knowing who the vulnerable person is. So I really do welcome this report, and it's about time we brought this up into the 21st century. Thank you.
Absolutely. Can I just respond, Chair? In relation to the cost of the DBS, just to be clear, when an applicant applies, it's £40 for the enhanced DBS, and then it will be £13 or £13.50 every year after that. So it actually works out about £40 every 3 years anyway. So there should not be, unless they change it. And again, it's a third party cost, so it's nothing to do with the authority setting that cost. We literally only charge that amount directly, and so it should work out when you think about it every 3 years. If they're paying £13, it's £1 cheaper, isn't it? On that point, CCTV, obviously we'll cover that again in more detail when we bring that report to you to make all those considerations. And I know our legal officer is chomping at the bit to state obviously some issues in relation to that. But just for you to know, as it stands, if any drivers wish to install CCTV in their vehicles now, they can do so. And it's on agreement by ourselves, because we like to be able to see the system, how it works, and also give information about the fact that they need to become data controllers themselves, and also the positioning of this, the CCTV itself. You know, we don't want it positioned in inappropriate circumstances, or it shouldn't be audio, for instance. There's lots of considerations that we will bring back to you when we're ready to do that piece of work. And I know, as I said, our legal officer, Craig Davis, will want to take part in those discussions as well.
Yes, it's something on the books, isn't it? We know it's coming. Ms. Lewis and I have discussed it. I've got concerns about the data controller in that currently it should be, well, if there are drivers who've installed it themselves, they are the data controllers, and they have to ensure that they retain that data for 28 days and that there is an easy access for it. It's matters that we'll have to consider later, because the authority, if we were to rubber stamp or enforce it immediately, there can be issues where we would become a data controller. But these are points which we need to iron out later.
Can I just come back on one question, Chair? And it's to you I asked the question. As committee members, will we be, would it be possible for us to hold, what they call them, like a workshop? A workshop, that's the word, thank you. Would it be possible to work with workshops with officers, or do you think it's just relevant just for officers to do it?
I think there's a lot of background work to be done beforehand, so maybe a case of cross that bridge when we get to it, because deal with the majority. It's, as Ms. Lewis has already said, we're going to be coming back to you with the information, and then as things become, as there's more clarity as to what's going to happen and or what the Senate say, then I think at that point we can give the consideration from that.
Okay, thanks, bro.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Davis, please.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for that. I'd just like to ask the officer. I've looked at the report and the emphasis, obviously, quite rightly on safety for the public. What provisions are going to be built into this to combat trafficking? You might have a driver who is careful, conscientious, polite, friendly, thinks he's doing a good job, but doesn't spot the red flags where people of females of a certain age are transported to certain addresses at a suspiciously regular interval. Just wondering what sort of because that's something that I think they have to be aware of, however good they are in every other department of their job.
Absolutely. I can say that obviously within the report, the DFT and Welsh Government are looking for consistency in terms of training. We already provide safeguarding training. For our new drivers, we provide a leaflet and we test them on the contents of the leaflet, which is produced by Bernardo's, specifically in relation to trafficking and child sexual exploitation, etc., so that they are aware of what that means. And we've also been very fortunate to have held safeguarding training for our existing drivers, offered that free of charge. And we held that in Cocket over a few years, actually, where a number of our drivers attended, members attended as well. They were all invited, and I know many of you did. And it was an interactive training where the drivers were encouraged to report anything that they saw to the police. So it's about seeing it and reporting it, but also understanding they wouldn't have the feedback. So they might feed in a piece of the jigsaw, but they won't necessarily know the outcome. And I think a lot of drivers were disheartened at the number of times they were phoning, but not knowing what had happened after. And they had to realise that was never going to happen. So it was really good. And from those sessions, I must say, the feedback I had was that there was lots of information flowing, back and forth, and also for clarification of what they should and shouldn't report. So we have been stalled a bit because of COVID, obviously, but we're looking at other ways now of getting that information out to the trade, whether that be recorded videos, apps, and also on our website. So we've got extra sort of links to external websites for the moment, because obviously getting 50 delegates into a room at the moment isn't achievable in the current time. But there are safeguarding training elements that we use already, but this document aims for that to become consistent going forward, so we're all doing it to the same standard.
Yep, thanks very much.
Councillor Gallagher, please.
Yes, two quick comments. One, I don't know if you can help Yvonne, but I've got all these documents in amongst the private agenda pack, and after these meetings, I delete the privacy. Are you able to send these documents separately to us so we can peruse and perhaps offer comments going forward?
Absolutely, I can do that.
And the second point as well, are the magistrates on board with this? Because we know that we'll make a decision and they go totally in the wrong direction just because of consistency. And I haven't seen anything when I briefly read it that they're included. And I know that the legal part of the law and justice is not devolved, but that shouldn't make a difference if we're going to adopt this.
Yes. In relation to the magistrates, no, they're not party to the full document. However, when maybe they become involved with the appeals, I'm pulling out my pack that I use for court. I've actually got within that a copy of the standards that came out in July last year. And the guidance was, when it came out was asking that the local authorities adopt these as really as soon as it was, but as soon as they can. I think they would give us slips to us. Yeah. And if you look on, it's page 36 of the, but actually the overall budget comes out. You see 35, which is Annex A. You can see what the double printing of the letters are there. Is it 43? To the assessment of previous convictions. Now, you'll note there that if you compare page 35 and 36 to the Institute of Licensing Guidance, I often term it embarrassingly that the Department of Transport plagiarised exactly what the Institute of Licensing have put in their guidance. So when I deal with an appeal and say perhaps the violence section with a 10-year period is relevant in that, or motor convictions or such, I will advise the magistrates as to these sections and or will inform them that the Department of Transport have copied them and that we should adopt. So the magistrates are inadvertently advised and drafted into these by the means of my advocacy, effectively. We don't put it in the full bundle because we don't adopt the full bundle, but we use Annex A because it is exactly as we use it in our IOL guidance. Is that okay in that way?
Well, I think we need to bring them along, but that's fine. And just one point, Chair, before we finish item 5, could I just make a comment before we exclude the public?
Yes.
Thank you.
No.
No, sorry, at the end of item 5, once this is over.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Downing?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think the main way we're moving forward is for the public to have confidence on the way we accept taxi drivers, because a lot of these people are elderly, and when they were young, anybody could jump in a car and drive it. Questions have been answered. I was going to ask about the DBS, but Chair, they got in there first. And I think we were all concerned about that, because the other thing is that when we go through the phased approach and we do our workshops, I'd be interested to see what the workshop says about the self-reporting, because at the moment this takes up a lot of our time, because I would say nearly 100% of the applications that come in front of us, they haven't let us know that they've been arrested or they've done speeding or whatever. And it would be nice to have a uniform, what's the word, I can't say, that if this happens, then the taxi driver should know what the penalty is going to be, not just wait for one of us, and we may bring it up on 3 occasions and may not bring it up on another 3 occasions. So we're not consistent in that way. Because on the report it does say that if they don't report to us in 48 hours, then we could class them as being not honest, which means they don't get a license. So I would like something consistent in this particular area. Thank you, Chair.
Do you want to reply us this, or?
No, obviously when we get to the stage where we're considering those aspects, we'll obviously discuss them at the time then in those relevant reports.
Awesome, thank you. Councillor Davis, is that a legacy hand, please? Thank you.
Yes, it was.
Thank you. Thank you. So we go item 6, exclusion of the public. Who's that item 5? Oh, apologies, item 5. I took the wrong one.
Shall I take you through item 5, Chair?
Yes, please, if you would.
Okay. The purpose of the report is to inform members of the proposed use of the National Register of taxi refusals and revocations. The background to this is that the register has been introduced nationally to ensure that local authorities are able to make decisions on whether an applicant is a fit and proper person. Both the Department for Transport and Welsh Government state that licensing authorities should sign up to this register. What this means in practice is that whenever the licensing authority processes a new or renewal application for a hackney carriage or private hire driver licence, a check of the register will confirm whether the applicant has been subject to a previous licensing decision involving a revocation or refusal of licence in another area. The information to be recorded on the database will be limited to the details stated in point 6. And if there is a match and the authority requires any further information about entries on the database, requests must be made to that relevant licensing authority. The authority, or our authority, is now signed up to the agreements necessary to use this database, and the requirements for using the database as outlined in paragraph 9 of the report will be implemented with immediate effect. So those are quite literally updating the forms as Yvonne has just alluded to. There's been a lot of work surrounding with that, notifying the existing licence holders and amending any sort of data retention periods, and that will be for 25 years, and right to those individuals identified that it could affect. So that's exactly where we're at now with this new database that we've signed up to.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Danley?
Yeah, just the obvious one, Chair. Has any authorities not signed up to this?
Through sort of communicating with other authorities through the IOL and Welsh Government, it's the uniformed approach, it's the harmonisation. So we're all pooling together, and at this stage, I believe most, if not all, have signed up.
In relation to that, the local authority itself is already signed up to it. It's been a long standing that trading standards have had involvement with NAFIN. So the authority itself already is. This is just another facet that's been brought into it. But yes, as Richard set out, there are authorities which are already party, and then there are others which are a long way behind. But we're making footsteps in the right direction, and I think Ms. Lewis would agree, it's probably not going to be that long until this element is fully in place.
Absolutely.
Just to follow on from that, Chair, do we have to have permission from the person to put their information on a database with regards to, I'm talking about GDPR?
It's we're going down a different road with this, but it's in relation to there can be evidence or conviction-based exemptions. So perhaps we could deal with that separately.
Yeah, they will be written to, Chair, and informed that they are going to be placed on the database for those decisions we've already made to refuse or revoke licences in the last 7 years, as outlined in paragraph 9. So there's an awful lot of work to do to liaise with current drivers and previous drivers. The application forms obviously are going to be amended so that they are informed and will be signing up to the fact that this will be common practice from here on in. And as I said, we haven't got access to any of that criminality data at all. We would then have to make a formal DPA request, as you've just mentioned, to that individual licensing authority to disclose the detail we require, as long as we've got good reason to ask for it. So those DPA requirements in the Act apply.
Thank you for that. Councillor Anderson, did you want to come back?
I was going to ask a question, but Yvonne answered it. Also, Yvonne, Richard, or Chair, being all this work you are having to do, have you got enough manpower?
We've never got enough manpower, no. But what we will be doing is taking a phased approach. As we said, we are not putting expectations out there that we can do this in a short amount of time. We can't. We're going to look at the priorities and we're going to work through as much as we can with the resource that we've got. I mean, it's difficult, in any time, but because of what we've had to endure during the pandemic, as you know, licensing have also taken on the coordination of all complaints and inquiries in relation to public health COVID inquiries, and also been involved in the enforcement of that as well across the board. So and not alone. I know in public health, we've all taken on extra work. But what it's meant for taxi licensing is that we've had to change our practices literally overnight. So when we had the notification of leaving the office last March, in March 2020, we literally had to change a paper-based service to receiving emails for applications, photographs for applications, and change our whole process in the back office effectively from home. That is taking longer to deal with every application we have, because whereas before an application was received and passed from officer to officer in the office, it's now being done obviously in the channels behind the scenes, on emails, or we've got drive set up, that kind of thing. But we've had also difficulties because third party authorities then, like the DBS or GPs not doing medicals, we've had to change all those procedures as well. So in the last 18 months, taxi licensing has completely and utterly changed the practices. We have no active telephone line, so we've got a recorded message asking everyone to use our email system. So at least then we can staff that and we can answer any query that's coming through, in a timely manner as best we can, really, with the staff we've got. So again, when we're dealing with all this new work for the harmonisation, rest assured we are fully supportive of it, and we are going to be trying to do that as quickly and as efficiently as we can.
Thank you. Councillor Gallagher?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There's nothing to do with item 5. I think it's a great move forward. But what I would like to note, I'm glad Yvonne is on the meeting at the moment, and don't blush, but I would like to formally thank Yvonne and her team for all the challenges that they faced in the last few months, particularly when the licensing legislation, COVID legislation has changed very often, having information on a Friday from Welsh Government, having to implement the following Monday, and how she's and her team have kept the licensing in Swansea on board and trying to keep them alive. It's been a huge challenge, and I know I've mentioned this to our Chair Penny before, and I just want to formally and recognise, and hopefully on the minutes, to say thank you to the team.
Thank you ever so much. It means a lot to have member support, and I will ensure the team hear your comments, so thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So we conclude this part of the meeting now. So we're going to formally exclude the public, please.